Teddy told me that in Greek, nostalgia literally means the pain from an old wound.
What makes a character worth watching? Here's Don Draper. He's a handsome, smooth-talking creative director with lots of money and a beautiful family. What about that makes him so interesting? Why are there 7 seasons of television following him? What's compelling about this scene, besides how ingenious it is of a pitch, is how it exposes the essence of Don as a character.
It's called a carousel. It lets us travel the way a child travels.
Don is the epitome of Madison Avenue businessman, successful, charming, and does whatever he wants. But he's also driven by the pain of an old wound. As season 1 methodically reveals, Don is an imposter. Born of a prostitute and raised in poverty, Don, originally Dick Whitman, stole the Draper name from a dead general in the Korean War. Their identities were mistaken and Don went along with it to escape his doomed home life. Don is a walking advertisement for the type of man he always wanted to be. His whole life is built on a lie, but in more ways than one. Notice how the carousel displays pictures of Don as the ideal family man, playing with his kids and making funny poses with his wife. For those who have seen the show, you know how misguided this is as a portrayal. Don is constantly jeopardizing his family, with his work, and with his various affairs. At this moment, Don, who himself is a walking advertisement, is pitching an ad based on a fictional picture of his life. This is what makes Don so interesting. This is what makes him worth watching for 7 seasons, because Don is, like all great characters, a contradiction. In The Art of Dramatic Writing, Lejos Egri writes, "Contradiction is the essence of conflict, and when a character can overcome his internal contradictions to win his goal, he is strong." Characters need conflict and contradiction just as much as a good plot does. We are social creatures, and so much of our existence involves studying other people and trying to ascertain their motives. The more confusing and contradictory someone is, the more effort we put into trying to understand them. Life is all about conflict and struggle, 2 opposing forces coming together to produce a new outcome. This is true for drama as well. This principle is called dialectics. It's been used in stories and debates since Socrates. Here's how it works based on what Egri writes. You start with a premise or proposition, which is your thesis. For Don, the thesis would be that he is a rich and talented Madison Avenue executive with the ideal nuclear family. Then you find a contradiction to the thesis, which is the antithesis. For Don, this would be the revelation of his past. His real name is Dick Whitman, and he is the penniless son of a prostitute who stole the Draper name from a fallen soldier in Korea. The thesis and the antithesis naturally come into conflict with one another because they contradict, and the resolution of that conflict is called the synthesis. What happens when a poor, motherless child with no hope of forward mobility suddenly becomes a decorated war vet with a promising career? Or, what happens when the handsome and rich family man, thesis, is secretly a fraud and a cheater, antithesis? What is the synthesis of that conflict? It's interesting, right? You naturally want to know how these contradictions play out. Now, this is more obviously demonstrated with Don's fellow AMC protagonist, Walter White. Walt was a middle-class chemistry teacher who hadn't achieved much in his life, thesis. But when he gets diagnosed with cancer, Walter uses his chemistry skills to deal meth as a way to pay for the hospital bills. Antithesis. His meager home life then clashes with this ruthless Heisenberg persona. The audience is left wondering how he can fulfill 2 contradictory roles, and that fuels further interest in his actions. When Mad Men and Breaking Bad were dominating AMC, many people attributed their success to audiences wanting anti-heroes, or sympathetic bad guys. That was no doubt an appealing wrinkle for those shows at the time, but it doesn't go deep enough in explaining why audiences loved that. What made them so engaging were the dialectical principles of contradiction. You can create a show that follows a bad guy, but if that character isn't driven by contradictory desires or actions, then it doesn't matter. They will be flat and uninteresting no matter how many evil things they do. We as viewers want to wrestle and puzzle over the conflicting actions and beliefs of a character in order to figure them out, just as we would with someone in real life. But there's another reason why you need a contradictory character at the center of your show. Because character creates plot. In his book Story, Robert McKee writes, "The event structure of a story is created out of the choices that characters make under pressure and the actions they choose to take, while characters are the creatures who are revealed and changed by how they choose to act under pressure. The plot and structure of a story is determined by the choices a character makes. There is no drama without choice. A story will feel rudderless and without drive when events keep happening to characters without involving their will, and choice is heightened through conflict. So it's no wonder that characters afflicted with contradictions face the most interesting choices. Protagonists like Don and Walter have so much at risk due to the contradictions in their lives. If Don was born and bred an ad man, then there's no past to hide from and no fraud to threaten his career. If Walter was always a drug dealer, then there would be no family unit to risk breaking, pun intended. But because they have these conflicts built into their very essence, Walter and Don are always making decisions when backed into a corner, and those are always the most interesting and dramatic of decisions. But a choice needs more than tension. It also requires motivation, and a contradictory character is inherently motivated. Egri writes, "A pivotal character must not merely desire something. He must want it so badly that he will destroy or be destroyed in the effort to attain his goal." Don's main motivation is to move forward. He shares this advice often with other characters when they have a moment of crisis. Ever since he was mistaken for another soldier, Don has been trying to force his way into a lifestyle his birth wouldn't allow, and looking backward would only shatter this illusion. In one way, Don is the inverse of Fitzgerald's Gatsby, a man whose facsimile lifestyle was intended to reunite him with his past. But Don strives for a successful job, fast car, big house, and pretty wife to insulate himself from it. And he wouldn't be so driven to maintain this lifestyle if it weren't for the contradiction his past creates. Every major development in the show is a direct result of Don's actions and decisions. And the reason those actions and decisions are dramatic and frustrating is because of Don's internal contradictions. The show, which is essentially about corporate developments and personal relationships, stays interesting and exciting because Don himself is interesting and exciting. You can't have a complex show without a complex protagonist. But remember, a complex protagonist isn't about writing the smartest, best-looking, most powerful, or charming person. Amazing attributes don't make a great character. It's all about the contrast of those attributes. Don's secret past makes his successful career more interesting. Walter's humble life as a high school teacher makes his drug dealing more dynamic. Hell, even Michael Scott is both an inappropriate and insecure boss while also being incredibly loyal and caring. Contradiction and contrast is what this world is made of, and it's why we spend hundreds of hours and 7 seasons watching fictional TV characters. Even handsome, smooth-talking ad executives like Don.